I miss your talks, they give me comfort. I miss your talks in a way that doesn't make noise but still manages to fill every quiet corner of my day. Like something soft has been removed from the air, and now even breathing feels a little heavier than it should. It's not just your words that I miss, it's the way they used to arrive, unforced and warm, like they already knew where they belonged. The way your voice carried a kind of calm that made everything else feel less urgent, less overwhelming. And maybe that's what comfort really is, not the absence of problems, but the presence of someone who makes them easier to hold. I didn't realize it at first how much those small conversations meant, how something as simple as you asking how my day was could change the entire shape of it. How your replies weren't just answers but places I could rest my thoughts without feeling judged or misunderstood. And now that space feels empty, not in a dramatic way, not in a way that demands attention, but in a quiet, lingering way that stays with me even when I try to ignore it. I miss the randomness of it all the way. We could start talking about nothing and somehow end up somewhere meaningful without even noticing the transition. The way silence never felt like a gap between us, but like a shared understanding that didn't need to be filled with constant words. And it's strange how something so simple becomes so rare once it's gone. How you start to search for that same ease in other conversations only to realize that comfort like that doesn't come often. It doesn't happen with just anyone. There was a softness in the way you spoke, not weakness, but gentleness. Like you chose your words with care, not to impress, but to connect. And that kind of intention is something you don't appreciate fully until it's no longer there. Now I find myself remembering the details, the way you would pause before replying as if you were really thinking about what I said instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. The way you notice things I didn't even mention directly, like you were listening not just to my words but to what was hiding behind them. And that made me feel seen in a way that is hard to explain, because being understood is not something you can measure. It's something you feel quietly, deeply, without needing proof. I miss the way your talks turned ordinary moments into something softer. How even the most tiring days felt manageable when I knew I could just talk to you, and somehow everything would make a little more sense. Not because you solved anything, but because you made me feel less alone in it. And that's the kind of comfort that stays with you long after the conversation ends. I think about the nights we talked longer than we planned, not because we had something urgent to say, but because neither of us wanted to leave that space we had created together. A space where nothing felt forced, nothing felt heavy, just two people sharing time in the most honest way possible. And now those nights feel distant, not forgotten, just out of reach, like something I can remember clearly but can't return to, no matter how much I want to. I miss the way your presence lived inside your words, how even the rough a screen or a call, I could feel that you were really there, not distracted, not distant, just present in a way that made everything else fade into the background. And maybe that's what I miss the most. Not just the talks themselves, but the feeling of being accompanied in a world that often feels too loud, too fast, too overwhelming. Um, Without you, those same days continue, but something is different, something small yet significant, like a piece of the rhythm is missing. I still have conversations, I still speak and listen and respond, but it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't carry that same quiet understanding, that same ease that made everything feel lighter. And I've realized that comfort is not something you can replace. It's something you experience with certain people in certain moments. And when it's gone, you don't find it again in the exact same way. You just learn to carry the memory of it. I miss your talks, not because they were perfect, but because they were real. Because they didn't try to be anything other than what they were: honest, simple, meaningful. And that honesty is what made them so rare. Sometimes I wonder if you realize the kind of impact your words had, if you ever knew that something as simple as talking could become something so deeply comforting for someone else. But maybe that's the nature of it. Maybe the most meaningful things are often unintentional. They happen naturally without effort, without awareness. And that's why they stay with us the way this has stayed with me. I still find myself wanting to tell you things, small things, random thoughts, things that don't seem important enough to share with anyone else but felt completely natural to share with you. And in those moments, the absence feels clearer, not heavier, just more defined, like an outline of something that used to be there. I don't know if this feeling fades completely or if it just becomes quieter over time. But right now, it exists as it is, soft, constant, real. I miss your talks. They gave me comfort in a way I didn't know I needed until I no longer had it. And maybe that's the part that matters the most. Not the loss, not the distance, but the fact that for a while something so simple felt so right, so easy, so genuine. And even now, as I sit with this feeling, I don't see it as something to regret. I see it as something to appreciate because not everyone gets to experience that kind of connection. Not everyone gets to know what it feels like to be understood so effortlessly. So if these words ever reach you in any form, just know this. Your talks were more than just conversations. They were a kind of comfort I didn't know how to ask for, but somehow found in you. And even though they are no longer a part of my everyday life, the feeling they left behind still lingers quietly, reminding me that something real existed once, and maybe that's enough to hold on to, even in the silence that followed. And even now, when the night stretches a little too long and the silence begins to feel heavier than it should, I find myself returning to those moments, not deliberately but naturally, like the mind has its own way of seeking comfort in familiar echoes. And it's strange how memory doesn't replay things exactly as they were. It softens the edges, it highlights the warmth, it lets the good linger a little longer than everything else. So when I think of your talks, I don't just remember the words, I remember the feeling around them, the calm, the ease, the quiet sense that for a little while everything was exactly as it needed to be. And I wonder if you ever feel it too. If in some unguarded moment you pause and think of those conversations not as something lost, but as something that once existed in its purest form, without pressure, without expectation, just two people sharing time in a way that felt natural. My days have learned how to move forward, they have adjusted, they have found new rhythms, but every now and then something small pulls me back. A phrase, a tone, a certain kind of silence that reminds me of how you used to listen. And in that reminder, there is no bitterness, no regret, just a soft ache that doesn't demand anything from me. It simply exists like a quiet truth I have come to accept. I've tried to understand why those talks meant so much, why something so simple could leave such a lasting impression. And the only answer I keep returning to is this: it wasn't just about talking, it was about being understood without having to explain everything. It was about feeling heard without having to repeat yourself.